Welcome, everybody. Anthony Zuiker is the creator of the CSI TV series and the spin-off CSI Miami and CSI New York, which, as you know, have actually changed the criminal justice system in this country. Now jurors expect you to actually prove that somebody's guilty and not just have somebody say he's guilty. Besides that, he's a pioneer of the diginovel genre, and there's a series of books called Level 26, which are interactive, and I'm sure he'll be happy to tell you about. This week, I know you're here to see Anthony and not me, so Anthony's here to talk about his personal memoir, Mr. CSI, How a Vegas Dreamer Made a Killing in Hollywood. We have copies in the back there, and he'll be available to sign the copies for you. So without further ado, please welcome Anthony Zuiker.
Thank you. Good morning. Nice little chair here. You know, when I woke up this morning, I said to myself, shit, I'm overdressed. So, anyway, hi, how are you? Thanks for having us at Google. This place is amazing, by the way. I heard there's an office in Zurich. Is that true? That's really cool. I'm Anthony Zuiker. I'm the creator of all the CSIs on television. These CSI fans out there today? Yay! Yes, you know, I came from, I'll tell you a little about myself and a little bit about CSI and kind of what I'm working on now for the future and how I kind of got to the book, Mr. CSI. I was born in Blue Island, Illinois, at the same hospital as Gary Sinise, ironically, who's the star of CSI New York. And my mother moved me west. I've been in Las Vegas for 40 years, only child, sort of a latchkey kid from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 11 o'clock at night. My parents, believe it or not, my mother dealt blackjack for 25 years. My father was a maitre d' in a gourmet restaurant. And, you know, an only child like myself in Las Vegas, all I did was really like roll casino dice and, you know, make up little board games with, you know, playing cards, and that's how I kind of occupied myself. But I was really a misunderstood kid, felt like I had some talent, felt like I had some intellect, but didn't quite know what to do with it. You know, I was so, you know, bored and curious at 13 years old. I invented 527 different sports board games, anything from saltwater fishing to Crips versus Bloods, you know, to Major League Baseball. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has done this, but has anybody else rolled a couple of dice and did like doubles, like, and that was a single or a home run, make your own baseball game as a kid? Anybody do that? It was just me. Well, I did that, and I perfected gameplay for dice and cards at the age of 14 for 6 major sports. Major League Baseball, NFL football, NBA, MMA, and literally 30 years later, we're just starting to be in talks with launching those games on the iPad. And it was something that I thought that I would invent games and put them in the stores and maybe, you know, make some money, but I realized as I got older there was actually no toy market. But even today, I held on to that gameplay, and I'll be probably putting those out in the iPad in some kind of gaming format. But, you know, as a kid, I was always very creative. I think the first time I got paid to be creative was I invented a billboard for a porn shop. And there were 3 kind of blow-up dolls. And I did this mock billboard, and the headline was, "Picking up airheads just got easier." And I walked into this porn shop in Las Vegas, and I gave the guy the comps. And he looked at it and had a big cigar in his mouth, and he said, I like these. I'll give you $500 in cash or $1,000 in credit. And I was like, And I said, well, I'll take the cash. And of course, I couldn't, you know, be paid for making porn billboards all my life, so I ended up writing papers for people in school for $300 a pop, 10 pagers. And why I did that is I graduated in UNLV, the Running Rebels, in 1991. And that was the year they beat Duke by 30. And people wanted to watch the Rebels play basketball on Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursday nights in the Shark Tank. So I would just go ahead and just do your paper for $300 a night. I had so much business, I had so much money. I would stuff like $100 bills inside pillow sacks and put them in my closet. And then I graduated, of course, in 91, couldn't get a job. But I always was pretty good at writing and wrote letters for people and, you know, did papers. And when they gave me the sort of Hall of Fame award at UNLV, I said, look, guys, you know, before you give me this award and give me an honorary PhD, make sure you understand that I have put half of the university through college with my typewriter. But they forgave me, and the rest is history. So after that, I found myself out of a job. I worked for the Mirage Hotel. Anybody been to Las Vegas before? You know the Mirage with the volcano? My name is Anthony in Japanese, and they say, oh, well, touching on my ewa, Anthony des, and I'd write it down. And I could say, welcome to the Mirage, thank you, every 4 minutes, and goodbye in like 28 languages. And I made this little international phonetic language booklet that had like the flag and all these sayings phonetically sort of broken down. And I'd give it a tagline. It was like called the International Phonetic Language Booklet, because there's no better way to respect a customer than to speak their language. And I remember one day I was on the tram, and the Zelma Wynn, Steve Wynn's mom, came and took the book from me and said, this is great, this is genius, I'm going to show Stevie. So I thought if they show that to Steve Wynn, he'll hire me to be some big executive. Of course, he never called. But I left the Mirage Hotel and I wrote a screenplay because my boss at the Mirage hated me so bad. There's this woman who just didn't like me. I wrote this thing called The Runner, which is about a sports betting movie. And it sold for like $35,000. And then literally a day later, Columbia Pictures bought it for $1 million, but already sold it for $35,000. So that was stupid. Deal or no deal. And we made that movie for like $7 million, went right to video, blockbuster, guaranteed or it's free. But I did end up writing the Globetrotters movie for Columbia, and it ended up on the desk of Jerry Bruckheimer, who loved The Voice and was just starting his career in television. And he called me in and said, what do you want to do for TV? And I said, well, something forensic. And there's a show on Discovery Channel called The New Detectives. And it's a docudrama forensics where a Linda Sobeck, who was the Raider cheerleader, was killed on the beach by a photographer. And in that sort of docudrama, the NFL Films voice guy comes on and says, in the summer of 1983, Linda Sobeck was killed. And they pulled this long blonde hair follicle out of the headrest of the Jeep. And in the follicle, at the very end of it, was a tag cell or a seed attached. And that signified that the hair was yanked out in a struggle. And I said to myself, wow, all that information was construed just by pulling a single hair follicle out of a headrest. I realized right then and there the philosophy of CSI pretty much is that the body is a perfect specimen, and that's what gave me the idea to do CSI. And I realized, wow, when you think about it, your skin, bruising, serology, DNA, saliva, hair, everything is designed to give the investigator clues because the body can't speak for itself. And that's where kind of CSI was born. So I wrote this script, and I went ahead and pitched ABC, which they passed. So I invented a company called Dare to Pass. And then I pitched CBS this show late in October, and they liked it. And I realized that the lady who hired me said, we're going younger with this new show called Survivor. If you write me a great script, then I'll fight my boss to get on the air. I wrote a script, attached Billy Peterson, who was from To Live and Die in LA, the movie. And then ironically, he's from Chicago, I'm from Chicago. He likes the Cubs, I like the Cubs. He drinks beer, I drink beer. He did Manhunter, I'm doing CSI, so he signed on. And it debuted October 16th of 2000. And they said, CBS called and said, if you could retain 85% of the viewers of The Fugitive with Tim Daly, you'll be considered a hit. And we far surpassed that. And we debuted at number 7 for the week, 22 million people. And this conglomerate huge hit was born. And literally, we started on Friday at 9 and went from Thursday at 9. We were there for almost 12 years. And just got knocked off our perch by a person of interest. Ooh, stings. And then we did CSI Miami literally a year and a half later. And we hired David Caruso. You might know David Caruso from taking off his glasses every 2 seconds. You've probably seen the mashup in Google, YouTube. And then a year later, we did CSI New York. So today we have CSI, 12 seasons, Miami, 8 seasons. CSI, 12 seasons, Miami, 10 seasons, and New York, 8 seasons. So 30 years of television. And 73.8 million people watch it every week. And it's in every country but 6. Afghanistan, North Korea, Uzbekistan, some other stan, but literally in every country but 6, it's become this huge global phenomenon. And my life completely changed. And when that happened, I realized that this was something that only happens once every 20 years. There's a whole CSI effect with the courtrooms. And then we had the writer's strike. In the writer's strike, I felt like I wanted to express myself more, and I wanted to do something big and different. And what drives me in this business is trying to change industry, and I think that's really what Google's all about, is trying to change things. Obviously, we change things. We change the way people eat, for God's sakes, here. It's ridiculous. And there's 75 cereals over there. I'm going to go from here and eat some cereal. But really trying to make some change, and I felt to myself, with the collapse of the music industry, and I see the collapse of the publishing industry, how do we go in and really reinvent and really recreate publishing? So I invented, like Bob said, what's called the diginovel, which basically is a high-octane crime thriller. For every 25 pages that you read, you log into a website, enter a code, and it unlocks a piece of CSI, actually a piece of motion picture footage, which will bridge you from one chapter to another. So it's kind of like watching a movie inside the book. And it comes with a whole interactive site, level26.com. So it's my way of trying to take publishing, motion pictures, and social community and kind of wrap them into one experience and gather community and control community and monetize it. Now, when we did this, we went over to Dutton and made a $2.1 million deal for 3 books. We shot this great motion picture. And the thing was, to actually read a book and stop and log into a website was so archaic. I get that. But once we made the app for then not the iPad, but what's the smaller one? iTouch. That's when it really began to really feel like a diginovel. And that was a big success. And why we chose level 26 is, if you don't know this, there are 25 levels of evil on the evil scale as to how they actually measure a serial killer. So I just did a fictitious thing and said level 26, and the top of my list for my villain was called Squeagle, who is a forensic-proof killer who wears black latex and has a zipper and has 2 eyeballs, and kind of like the Gimp in Pulp Fiction, or kind of like the guy in American Horror Story, but we won't go there for that. Looks just kind of like the guy. And then we did that, then we did Dark Prophecy. And Dark Prophecy for the iPad pretty much was the ultimate iteration of what the future of publishing, in my opinion, really is. And in Dark Prophecy, which is like $13 in the iTunes store, is an interactive app where we have 3 levels of engagement for the user, which is 1, we have the Kindle version, which is just straight read. 2, you read the book, watch the movie, which is a 1-hour motion picture. And 3, read the book, watch the movie, have sound effects when you turn the pages. Blood drops will go on the page when someone's being killed. There's a gunshot will go off if someone's being shot. There's all kinds of bios and pictures. There's carousels of photos. There's sound effects. There's a trailer we cut together. And literally, it was the ultimate iteration of what a diginovel can be, and the future of publishing could be going forward. And that did really, really well. And TechCrunch was all over that. That was a lot of fun. And then we're launching Dark Revelations next month, December 29th. But the point of it is this. It didn't do huge business. Although we had a lot of premium content wrapped inside the books, it was such we were so ahead of our time. But when I talked to Apple about this, and Robert Kondruk over at iTunes, and Karen LaSala back when she was there back in the day, they were very clear about, the win is in the doing. And what that's turned into is something really, really special. Because by taking a chance and taking publishing and really trying to reinvent it and trying to push the medium forward, what we learned is that although it didn't do big monetary business, it afforded us all these new opportunities. And perhaps one of the biggest opportunities we have is we just got awarded the YouTube channel for Google called Black Box Television. And that was announced a couple of weeks ago. That's really, really great. And in Black Box Television, we're going to be doing premium content through YouTube on our own channel, which will launch at sometime next April. We're doing 12 Anthony Zuiker Presents, which are 12 individual 15-minute genre-type shorts for our channel. And we're also doing 38 different little horror shorts by Tony Valenzuela on Black Box TV. So again, this is, as Google and YouTube have a commitment to be in the premium content business, we're now pulling resources from Hollywood, having top-list directors and actors to come in and do premium content for that channel. So that's very exciting too. And we'll see how that all goes, sometime next year. So after literally 12 years of CSI, 10 years of Miami, and 8 years of New York, we decided it was time to tell the story of Anthony Zuiker. So we launched the book called Mr. CSI, which launched last Tuesday. I just came from New York last night and was promoting it. But I think what's interesting about that book in particular is, what I didn't really realize till the book was finished, is it's so much a book about struggle and what the only child like myself went through to try to get some acceptance. This is about a kid who couldn't get into Catholic school because his mother was a cocktail waitress and the nuns considered it a sin, so they wouldn't let me in. And then when I had a science project due, I went ahead and had no money, and I went ahead and got a box from the back of a grocery store, and I stole a bottle of spray paint. I made a plaster of Paris glacier, and I cut out little snowflakes and wrote a one-page paper on the glacier for a science project. I stole from across the street a little mountaineer man to climb up the glacier, which is a kind of a figurine toy, and I handed it in, and I went to recess, and literally I went to the bathroom and peeked through the window, and there was a big, huge blue ribbon on my science project. And I was like, oh my God, I think I just won this. And then I saw the nuns kind of gathering around, and they were looking at me like someone like threw a flag in the air, like in football. And next thing I know, I came back when they announced the winner. They took my winning blue ribbon and put it on somebody else's. And I was like, oh no, it was my first time I really experienced injustice as a child. And that was such the source of my rage. And when you ask yourselves, what is the source of why you do this job at Google, like why you get up and why you want to be creative, everybody has their own fuel source. My fuel source was rage. I was so pissed at those nuns for robbing me. But it really kicked me into high gear. And then literally from that point on, I turned myself around as a student. And right when, I wrote CSI and it took off, it became the biggest show in the world back to back in the world. The night of the People's Choice Awards, my father, who was estranged, actually shot himself the night of the People's Choice Awards. So there I was getting 2 awards, one for CSI and Miami, only to wake up to arguably the biggest crime scene that's ever happened to me, which is death of my father. And Gil Grissom is played by Daniel Holstein, who's a real CSI, and he's the guy I did research with for the show to write the pilot. He was also the guy who found the body and called me. So that was a really weird art imitates life, and life imitates art. And after that, I had to pull myself together emotionally and begin to realize, where my place was in the world. I buried my father, took care of his bills, and when I walked into his house, right when he shot himself, the body was gone, and I put booties and gloves on, and it was actually walking through my father's apartment, and it was like walking through a crime scene. I was checking the video, the message recording for the phone to see who called. I was seeing what he left behind, what kind of medication he was on, if there was a note. There was no note, there almost never is. Stacks and stacks of Bic lighters. He was drinking a bunch of Coors Light, and he had all these weird pictures around, and all his boxes were packed and sealed with tape. And I couldn't quite figure out, and what I learned was he was on his way to move to Florida, but after Katrina happened, all the mobile homes went up like 40%, he couldn't afford it. He just lost his job, and he ended his life. So that was incredibly tragic. But that source of the way you grew up being misunderstood as a talented person, I believed I was, and the way of having an injustice and also really never being, quite understood as a person that was never quite like anybody else. Not very few 13-year-olds make board games for 3 straight years, in a one-bedroom room, but I did. And then after my father committed suicide, I realized that I had to pull it together and follow the dream that I wanted to follow, and that was one day be able to retire my mother. So after CSI hit, I was able to walk into a casino where she worked. This is a woman who raised me as a single mom from Chicago, who worked herself to the bone, whose fingers, she can't even really close her hand because she's been dealing out of the shoe in 21 for 20 years, and her hands are now crippled. I walked in and put a check on the blackjack table and said, "Money, please." And she's like, what? And she took a look at the check, and she's like, "What's this?" And I'm like, "It's over, Mom. It's over. You don't have to work anymore." And she was like, didn't know what to do, and she started crying. I can't clock out. I'm a proud woman. And literally, I picked her up like Officer and a Gentleman, and I walked her out of the casino, and people were like clapping and crying and pulling the slot machine. And, God bless you. Retired my mother, and about a year later, retired my father. Now they're at home, enjoying a great life. And I realized after all this struggle that's in the book, that the greatest success was me being able to be a father to my 3 boys, Dawson, Evan, and Noah, which are now 11, 8, and 4. We live in Malibu. They love outdoor water sports, having a great time with their dad. And no matter how much struggle you really encumber in your life, something really good can come out of it. And I think that's the story of the book. So, thanks very much. Thank you. I remember creating the Diginovel for Apple, and they were like, we don't know we don't know where to put you. Like, is this a book? Is it a movie? Is it a TV show? Is it iTunes? I mean, it was, and I think, my life at the end of the day, I'm into so many things. Like, when I first started CSI, it was about sitting down, writing a script, producing a script, and that's a 55-page long script that takes you about 4 or 5 days. It takes 8.5 days to shoot. It's a $4 million budget. You go through 3 weeks of post, and you're on the air about 5 weeks later, and you're about 6 scripts ahead of time in the summer before you air. Now in my life, we have this company, Dare to Pass. We're not only are we, for me in the morning, I get up, I drop the kids off, I go to work. Usually either writing a treatment for television or writing a script. And then we're also, I'm also probably doing some development meetings on some apps, for future business, and taking movie pitches and television pitches. Probably go to lunch and then come back and do a million phone calls. But literally, our company really does television, movies, apps, cross-platform storytelling, publishing, and we're in a foray of things because my position is, although TV is the bread and butter, the future of what we're trying to do as a company really is what we're doing through Google and YouTube, which is really trying to be our own network, just doing high premium content at the highest level to have more ownership and more creative control. Because I think the thing about television is there's so much red tape in the notes process and the creative process that it gets so frustrating that, the thing about the YouTube channel for us is there's a budget, you're creative as possible to get the best audience possible, and you get the pure artist performance in the execution of the writing and the producing, and that's what's so exciting for us. So we're not just doing one thing anymore. We do multiple things every single day to try to figure out the next wave of technology and how it converges into storytelling for not only this area, but for Hollywood. Well, it's a good question. At the end of the day, it's pretty much only going to be as good until you hand it over. You spend your days by yourself writing these scripts, and at that level it works pretty good. And I think once you hand it over to a director that comes in as a guest, you're pretty much at their mercy. I mean, I've always stayed on the set every single day for every single shot, just in case the director decides to, shoot an airplane when we're shooting a train. And the director will come in. I think the biggest misnomer in television is just because it makes sense in your mind in the script doesn't mean the director sees it the way you see it. So I would, literally 99.9% of the shows that I would watch after a director would get their hands on it, you couldn't really recognize the show. You're like, where's the thing that I wrote? And you have to go back in the footage and try to, there's 4 things at the end of the day in TV, in movies. Well, TV, there's the show that you write, the show that you shoot, the show that you cut, and the show that you air. And they're all different iterations. So my advice always has been to younger writers, which is if you're going to write something, make sure you stay on set, talk to the director, produce your episode, which doesn't mean sit on a chair and drink coffee, but actually you're being involved. And the more you do that, the more you recognize what you've written. So it's a very frustrating process, but when it works, it works. Unless it's Quentin Tarantino, then you hand your script in and he makes it 10 times better. Well, look, we almost did CSI Chicago, almost. With LL Cool J, and that went away almost, or this close. But I think, I know that television and movies in and of itself is a very, very wasteful business. To go ahead and purchase 80 scripts, to shoot 12, at least $8 to $10 million an episode for a pilot, and then maybe air 3, has to be a $100 million hit every time. If you got Google money, it's great. The stock's $400, everybody's happy. But it's still very wasteful. I'm surprised that the industry hasn't taken failed pilots and launched them on their own failed pilot channel or something, to where you could just repurpose it. Throwing shows in the garbage that never air after you spend so much money seems so wasteful. And there's going to be a time where the advertiser just doesn't want to participate in the broken model of television, where you're advertising on the air for everybody when you're really trying to isolate a specific target market. And I think what the web does and what Google does so well is there's a way to isolate your customer to a T, and that's the future of all content in my opinion. Alcohol, no. No, you know, it's funny because all three shows have to call in their stories to Bruckheimer's company, so we're not both doing human trafficking the same week. So it really is. There's the thing about CSI, ironically, is it's really begets so much more stories because of the show. You know, we're trying to find the things to surprise an audience. You know, I think the one thing about, you know, YouTube that was great is there's so many great surprises in amateur content. You know, you're always surprised by a cool video or a funny video. So for us, we're trying to find ways. You know, we've done 757 episodes of CSI over the course of 12 years, and the audience is very, very stingy, and they get bored very, very quickly. So trying to find the cutting-edge storyline to engage you week to week when you have three shows competing against itself on top of all the knockoffs is very, very challenging. But you know, to date, we're still on the air, and we're still doing a pretty good job. So the great thing about the show is we can take Fishburne out and put Ted Danson in, and the show still does well because the concept is so strong. And the theme of that on the worst day of your life, there are CSIs that will scrutinize evidence and bring a sense of closure and put away the bad guy is pretty much a central thing that works all over the world. Yeah, there is a format to the pilot that we still uphold today, which basically is there's an A-side teaser, which is the inciting incident, the murder. And the B-side is we show up and look around and say something clever before the commercial. That's pretty much the format. But it is a howdunit show. You know, it's one of those shows where you're talking to 3 or 4 suspects, one's guilty. Whoever's the most guilty is the most subtle, and you know, that's the big thing. So if there's a guy, you know, with cuts all over his hands and he's talking all kinds of craziness, that's probably not the killer. But if it's a little old lady in the back, you know, she probably is the killer. But front of the show is the howdunit versus the whodunit. And we always go to autopsy and look at the body. We do recreations, flashbacks, and it was, you know, flashbacks and recreations were considered a crutch in television, and we use those for the storytelling. And we try to wrap a personal story around the episode, so you care about the victim, and you hate the villain. At the very end, put together the puzzle piece of what makes CSI so great, which is the mystery, and bring some sort of closure to someone you care about in the episode. We've been doing that format for 12 years, and it works perfectly. I think the 2 things that inspired me the most to be in the business was Swingers with Jon Favreau and Pulp Fiction, Tarantino. I think those are the 2 that really, I sat in the theater in Swingers. I saw it was a dollar theater in Las Vegas, paid $1 and sat there and laughed and just said, you know, I think I could write something like this. This seems like it's doable. You know, it's a bunch of guys in LA trying to make it. I can do that. And then I remember watching Pulp Fiction saying, I can't do that. That's pretty great. But those 2 films for me really cemented that I wanted to be a writer in Hollywood, and you know, tried to emulate some of that stuff. And then when I bumped into Quentin Tarantino at a 9/11 function, I was surprised at the fact that he was actually a fan of mine and a fan of the shows. And he would quote quotes of things that I've written, which is, you know, blows my mind. And if you've ever been around Quentin Tarantino, you know, he's pretty much another level of individual in the business. You know, he knows every actor from the 40s and 50s. He knows every film, every TV show. Nobody's more well versed in the industry than him. And the 2-hour finale we did was actually a 1-hour finale, but he decided to take the script and, you know, add some things to make it a 2-hour finale, which is unbelievable. And CBS just gave him another $5 million to do it and didn't say anything about it, which is unbelievable. And that was the highest rated show to date was that episode. And he's super, super talented and very effortless in what he does, but the product is just unbelievable. It's just probably one of our best filmmakers of our time.
If there's no more questions, let's thank Mr. Zuiker for coming
Right.
to Google.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys. Thank you.